have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Hum.
I'm Ann Northrup.
And this week, same-sex marriages got underway in Kansas and South Carolina, so we are closing up shop.
Yeah, let's think about that for a minute.
Kansas and South Carolina.
Okay, let that sink in. We'll get back to it. Michigan, however, is trying to unmarry 300 same-sex couples who got married under a lower court decision that the state is now calling erroneous.
Transgender leader and leftist leader Leslie Feinberg, the author of Stone Butch Blues, has died at the age of 65.
In Greensboro, North Carolina, Stephen White, who we told you about last week when he was viciously attacked, has died from that attack by a man he picked up in a gay bar.
Meanwhile, at New York City's big jail, Rikers Island, a new unit has opened for transgender women who have yet to have genital surgery.
The Vatican holds an international conference of right-wing extremists to make up for the mixed synod to uphold their bigoted view of what makes a family, which the Pope chimed in on.
Yeah, but there was progress this week in Botswana and Baja. Did I say that right?
Yes, you did. Blood testing panel tells the FDA to drop the outright ban on gay male blood donations, but is continuing to urge discrimination based on sexual orientation.
We're going to review a couple of new gay-themed movies, one about World War II codebreaker Alan Turing, and the other Switzerland's pick for Best Foreign Language Film at the Oscars. And
Andy will review Hugh Jackman in the new Jez Butterworth play on Broadway and an off-Broadway revival of Rodgers and Hammerstein's Allegro,
which I'd never seen before.
Okay.
All right, so we do start out in not totally unexpected to our viewers, because if you've been following this, but South Carolina and Kansas. Now, these are states, in terms of same-sex marriage, that are in circuits that have already said you got to give people the right to marry, and the Supreme Court's not reviewing it, so you got to do it. And their governors, of course, and attorneys general and everything are being very resistant. But same-sex marriages did get underway in South Carolina.
Yes.
This is where the Civil War began, folks, and where it may end.
South Carolina is in the Fourth Circuit, and the Supreme Court had let stand a Virginia ruling in favor of same-sex marriage, and South Carolina is in that same circuit. So it seemed inevitable that marriages would be legal there for same-sex couples, and sure enough, that's what has been decided, and the marriages have begun.
They have begun, but I think the Attorney General there is still trying to get a stay out of the Chief Justice.
They are, and the same is true in Kansas and, in fact, in a number of other states, which we'll enumerate now. Between the, with the Sixth Circuit, the Ohio, Michigan, Kentucky, Tennessee decision by the bad Circuit Appeals Court that said you cannot have same-sex marriage.
No, they didn't say you can't have it. They said you can ban it.
You can ban it. That has given ideas to attorneys general and governors around the country who say, aha, an opening for us to keep this going.
Because the Supreme Court may eventually take it, and they may rule that states still can ban, because the Supreme Court has not ruled on that. They haven't taken these good decisions. They haven't reviewed these good decisions in the other circuits, but they haven't made a final determination on this issue.
One thing that's interesting to me is that everyone seems so convinced that the Supreme Court is going to take these cases, because now attorneys for all the plaintiffs in Ohio, Michigan, Tennessee, and Kentucky have filed their appeals with the Supreme Court. Everyone is so 100% convinced that the Supreme Court is taking this, that courts and politicians and everyone else around the country are now making decisions based on the idea that the Supreme Court will eventually rule on this.
Well, I mean, all the we're talking about Michigan, Ohio, Tennessee, and Kentucky, where we got the bad decision. All of the lawyers in those cases for us got together and said, we're just going to go to the Supreme Court. We're not going to go for en banc. But everybody's involved. Mary Bonato from Gay and Lesbian Advocates and Defenders in New England joined the Michigan team. Lambda's involved, ACLU, NCLR, everybody, and some private firms, but not Olson and Boyce.
Abby Rubenfeld from Tennessee, Pee Wee Herman's sister.
Pee Wee Herman's sister and the former legal director of Lambda Legal Defense many years ago.
Exactly.
But she's a Tennessee lawyer now.
Yes,
she's
for a long time. Well,
a long time.
Not so country.
No.
But she's been in Tennessee for a long time. And yes, they're all involved, and not Olson and Boyce, and I'm interested in what they have to say.
But back to Kansas,
yes.
15 same-sex couples got married in Sedgwick County. Kansas has 105 counties. I think by the time we started the show today, they were up to 20 issuing licenses under a federal ruling. But the Attorney General is still fighting in the Supreme Court there, the state Supreme Court, but they issued an order clearing the way for the marriages.
Absolutely. And in fact, 10 clergy members in Wichita conducted a wedding for 15 same-sex couples the other day.
I don't imagine one of them was from the Phelps clan.
Well, you never know. And also,
that's true. There are some good Phelpses now.
In the context of the Supreme Court lifting the stay on the Kansas marriages, Scalia and Thomas spoke out, particularly Clarence Thomas, and said they are just gobsmacked at the idea that the Supreme Court did not review the positive rulings on the cases in the 4th, 7th, 9th, and 10th circuits.
Clarence Thomas, who rarely speaks and never speaks during oral arguments, never. I mean, I think maybe once. He said, look, this court has recognized a strong presumption that it would review decisions holding federal laws unconstitutional even in the absence of a disagreement among lower courts. So
what's the deal, he's saying?
What is going on?
Well, one little thing that indicates is that they could not get 4 people to take this, to grant cert and review those cases. So have Roberts and Alito deserted them on the right wing on these cases?
You never know the mind of the court until they retire and they write their books.
Well, as Art Leonard said as a guest here last week, a law professor, that clearly both the left and right wings on the Supreme Court are unsure of the Anthony Kennedy vote and therefore did not grant review on those cases.
So, again, this whole marriage thing may still seem inevitable to people. It's not completely. And in Michigan, they're showing how mean they can be about this. They used the decision by the Sixth Circuit, which upheld their right to ban same-sex marriage, to say that the 300 couples who got married in Michigan when there was a brief opening under a court order there, a federal court order, were erroneously married and will not be recognized by the state. But the ACLU says that will be rejected just as it was in Utah.
Well, also, I think they are not going to be allowed to unmarry those couples until there is a Supreme Court decision, because all of this is being appealed to the Supreme Court, and so they can't consider the Sixth Circuit decision a final decision. But I'm sure that they will attempt to withhold benefits until someone knocks them over the head and forces them to.
Well, they're withholding benefits in Florida.
Well, wait, let me say one more thing about benefits in Michigan.
Go right ahead.
When same-sex couples were not allowed to marry in Michigan, before the lower court said they could, the state passed something called the Public Employee Domestic Partner Benefit Restriction Act that said same-sex couples can't get benefits because they are not married. And a Michigan federal judge has now ruled that act violates the 14th Amendment, and that they should be allowed to get benefits because they can't get married.
Yeah, but what are they supposed to do to protect the traditional family?
Well, and
what's
are they
left to them?
Well, what's left of them is allowing Charles Manson and his 26-year-old girlfriend to marry. Unbelievable.
Right.
So just to be clear, the Fourth Circuit, which decided the Virginia case, said to South Carolina that we're not going to stay the court order that says marriages can begin, and so marriages did begin in South Carolina.
And in terms of some other court cases, Texas now has 10 lawsuits against the ban on same-sex marriage.
There were oral arguments in Mississippi last week with Robbie Kaplan arguing for same-sex couples. She won the Windsor-Doma case at the Supreme Court.
But Governor Phil Bryant there, who has a gay son whose rights he does not support, is ready to appeal any order to open marriage to gay couples. And then State Representative Alice Clark down there did an ad for a same-sex marriage because she apparently has a gay child. And they're saying the decision in the Mississippi case could come down any moment.
May have happened before you see this.
Right.
But they also talked about the local lawyer being stumbling and not coming up with much, but you know, sometimes that's the way of those foxy Southern lawyers.
In Nebraska, the Attorney General tried to delay the inevitable, and 7 couples there filed in federal court in Omaha to challenge the ban. In South Dakota, the judge refused to dismiss the challenge to the ban on same-sex marriage, so that's going forward.
And in dismissing that motion of the state to rejecting that motion to dismiss the case, the judge said that the Windsor decision trumps the old Baker decision. And one of the arguments in all these cases has been whether this decision 40 years ago by the Supreme Court not to review a Minnesota case, Baker, that
for want of a federal issue.
Yeah, that rejected the right to same-sex marriage, whether that still applies.
Right.
But this South Dakota judge and other judges reviewing these marriage cases say, look, they may not have overruled it specifically, but everything they said in the Windsor case overrules Baker, and you would be naive to think that they're not considering that overruled.
Yes, said Judge Karen Schreier down there. Haven't you read Scalia's dissent in Windsor? And then there is Florida. I'll get back to that.
Sure.
A gay couple there used their marriage license, they'd gotten married elsewhere, to change their names on their driver's licenses. And they were sent a letter by Brevard County that both are in danger of losing their licenses. Their driver's licenses.
Yeah.
They don't have a marriage license as far as Florida's concerned.
Yeah, and for applying for a name change on their driver's license, they're in danger of losing the licenses completely because what? It's considered fraud?
Yeah, I'd love to see the outcome of that case. I hope the state has to pay them some damages.
Well,
why are you being so mean?
Exactly. Well, here are
Governor Snyder.
Here are another.
Snyder, not Snyder. That's come on, the guy who just got reelected.
Rick Scott.
Rick Scott.
Yeah.
Snyder is Michigan.
Yeah.
He's mean too.
Well, here's another strange footnote. Arizona is still fighting the Ninth Circuit's decision to legalize same-sex marriage. So now the Attorney General has gone to court to lodge yet another appeal of this decision based on the Sixth Circuit decision or whatever they're phoning up about the Ninth Circuit. But he's told the plaintiffs, the same-sex couples, it's not that I think we're going to stop marriage or anything. It's just that we're trying to avoid paying the legal fees of your side. But you know how he wants to avoid paying the legal fees? By winning the case and getting the Supreme Court to outlaw same-sex marriage.
Good luck with that.
You're a little disingenuous in your argument, sir.
Well, speaking of arguments, Marc Solomon, who works for Freedom to Marry and has been involved in this issue on the ground with,
in Massachusetts,
right,
in California.
for many, many years.
Yep.
He made a presentation this week and he said...
He has a new book out.
Yeah, we've talked about this. But he says, we started winning when we changed the message from rights and benefits, that's what we want, to that what we want is love and commitment. He said that was the radical thing that
We've
seemed
said
to
that for
turn the tide.
years.
Well, I'm saying it, and I'm just reminding people how we got here.
Okay. More interestingly, he says that Freedom to Marry will shut its doors and go out of business once same-sex marriage is legalized nationally by the Supreme Court. But I think there are going to be a lot of mop-up operations necessary as the right wing still tries to maneuver around this with religious discrimination, exempting themselves from services, all sorts of
And
things.
protecting the civil rights of people who get married.
Yes.
Just protecting the civil rights of single LGBT people in these states.
Well, here's a small example of that. In Kansas City, maybe Kansas City and Topeka, private, religious, unfunded by any government group, homeless shelters are debating whether to allow legally married same-sex couples to stay together in their shelters.
There was one run by evangelicals, and they said, we don't believe in this, and we're not going to serve them. But I was encouraged reading that story to read from other Christian groups and even the Catholic Church saying we accept people as they are because they come from all faiths. We don't demand that they embrace our faith.
Right.
Well, this isn't guys and dolls.
Well, there are certainly many who profess a religious faith that forbids them to serve same-sex married couples on the grounds that that would be too sanctioning of those couples and therefore inappropriate for their faith. But I agree, those other religious organizations did talk positively about serving everybody. Even the Salvation Army is now making another pitch for the idea that they serve everyone. Yes, it's Christmas time.
Money.
And they're putting out those red kettles, but in fact
they don't want to keep getting those lumps of coal in the kettle.
Well, they're talking a better game than they used to, but
they haven't changed their view.
They have not changed a lot of their views.
But
they've changed some of their views.
And they haven't changed their views in the Catholic Church. So Cardinal Raymond Burke, we've shown you his picture a couple of times. This is the guy who was the number 2 in the Vatican, and he got demoted for being so obstreperous about some of this stuff.
He was number 2?
He was the head of he was considered the number 2 because he headed the Judicial Commission or something, and they described him as the number 2.
Okay.
He's number nothing now. Anyway, he says he would deny communion to any, he's American-based. He said he would deny communion to any politician who voted for same-sex marriage. He had previously claimed that homophobia is, quote, simply announcing the truth, helping people to discriminate right from wrong. What's wrong with that?
Well, he's been demoted.
So then the Pope invited all these hate mongers from around the world. It was quite an ecumenical feast, and there were no gay positive people there.
No, it was people like Rick Warren and
Tony
the Southern Baptist Convention. And
these horrible people.
Yeah.
To this conference on the now, they didn't say complementarity. It says complementary of man and woman.
It was a make-good for the Synod. It was to appease the right wing after the Synod had been a small attempt to be a little more progressive.
So this Holy Father that gets all this good press said that marriage is in crisis, and he said a degradation of morals is causing the devastation. How about looking at your own degradation of reality and your degradation of human rights causing devastation? Anyway.
Well, everyone's very excited that he's coming to Philadelphia next year for the World Congress of Families.
I'm not excited because I'm probably going to have to get together and do some kind of a demonstration against the bum.
Well, it'll be a little more convenient because he'll probably come to New York for the UN annual September big meeting, international meeting of all world leaders. But more interestingly, all of this is going to happen right before part 2 of the Synod, which is supposed to follow up on the discussions and recommendations on how they're going to treat family matters, whether it's same-sex marriage or gay people or couples who've been divorced.
I am not interested in what an all-male hierarchy has to say about any of this. And you shouldn't be either, because that is sinful to exclude women from leadership.
Okay.
That's a big sin. But if there's any silver lining in all the progress we've been making this year, it's that the National Organization for Marriage, our nemesis, their funding was down 50% in the last year, and half of that is only coming from 2 anonymous donors. If you happen to know who they are, send me an email at andyhum@aol.com. If you'd like to be on our email list for weekly program previews, you can write to that same address, or if you want to remonstrate with us about anything.
Oh, please, feel free. And, you know, Fred Karger's been trying for years to get the names of those donors. And
he's very assiduous about it.
He's won a lot of Human Rights Commission and court cases that have ordered NOM to reveal their donors, and they just refuse, and they just kick and scream and fight back.
All right.
So we may or may not find out eventually, but I have a feeling it's probably some rich men on the right wing.
All right.
You think that's a fair guess?
You never know.
Okay.
They probably are very rich, although there is the widow's mite and everything.
All right. Well, seriously, this week is the observance of the Transgender Day of Remembrance, and we particularly remember this week Leslie Feinberg, who has just died at the age of 65.
We have a picture of her there. That's the Stone Butch Blues, which was her novel, which was very successful and sort of iconic.
She also wrote the novel Drag King Dreams and the nonfiction Transgender Warriors. There she is with her partner, Minnie Bruce Pratt, wife, actually. They eventually got married.
They were together for 22 years. And Minnie Bruce wrote the obit for Leslie, and I want to quote from it because it says that Leslie described herself as an anti-racist, white, secular Jewish, female revolutionary communist. Now, you know, she had decades of illness from tick-borne diseases, including Lyme. She advanced a Marxist concept of transgender liberation. Very, you know, came out of the working class.
Very dedicated to anti-war, anti-racist, pro-union.
She was in the Workers' World Party.
She edited their magazine.
Heavy duty.
Yeah.
And she fought against American imperialism, and she attributed her illness to bigotry, prejudice, and a lack of science on the condition that she was suffering from.
Yeah.
But and you know what? She was quite the radical, and she was also a very nice person.
Absolutely.
Very affirmative whenever she spoke, and she was always affirming of you and what you were trying to do.
And a great icon, and a great hero to people, and a great leader in the sense of being a role model for young trans people and people all over.
We love Leslie.
She was a very important figure, and Stone Butch Blues is a very important book, which she always claimed was not autobiographical, although she identified as trans. And, you know, these are seminal works that she wrote, and she was a hugely important figure in our history.
Right.
And her death at 65 is a great loss.
Yes. All right. And then, and by the way, the Transgender Day of Remembrance is primarily about all the people subjected to violence in the transgender community.
And we have another case of that this week with the death in Bordeaux, Tennessee, a suburb of Memphis, of transgender Gizzy Fowler. She was murdered at age 24, beaten severely, and shot to death.
On the positive side for transgender folks, the Rikers Island Jail, 11,400 inmates. This is where you get put when you're in detention. They do lock people up for a year sometimes there, who get small, you know, under a year sentences, right? But they have
mostly awaiting trial.
So this unit is for transgender women who have not had genital surgery, because up till now they have been with the state law requires you are assigned by your
genitals.
By your genitals. That's it, not by your gender. So they've had to be in with the men. Now they have their own unit. I was up there. There's about 30 places. They surveyed the people in the jail about where they would like to go. Half don't want to go there because they say whenever you get into jail, it's like you negotiate your place in the hierarchy and everything, and you don't necessarily want to go into an unknown thing. But half do want to go, and it's all about. Rikers Island, which is the jail, has been under a lot of scrutiny for violence by officers and by other inmates.
Yeah.
So this is one of their efforts to alleviate that.
Okay.
We hope it works.
In Miami, the Miami-Dade Commission Committee on Public Safety voted 3-1 for adding a gender identity and expression non-discrimination clause to their human rights law. There will be a final vote on December 18th. 238 speakers showed up against adding these protections. Only 30 showed up in favor of them, and yet the commission 3-1 voted for them, which I thought was a terrific act on their part.
Well, staying in Florida, the Representative Ileana Ross Lehtinen, who was one of the few Republicans who supports LGBT rights, one House member. We knew that she had a trans son, but they did a television interview on a Miami station there, and it was first, they first reported about this, that she had a trans son back in 2010, and this is billed as the first transgender child of a member of Congress.
That we know of.
That we know of.
Yeah.
So if you have other candidates out there, but it was all very positive.
It was.
The son's name is Rodrigo, used to be Amanda.
Yep. In Michigan, they're having a fight over a non-discrimination law, whether it should be sexual orientation only or sexual orientation and gender identity and expression. This is a fight the U.S. Congress has had, that states have had.
But none of the state laws that have passed since New York have not included gender identity and expression as well.
Well, Michigan has a real right-wing vein there. The American Family Association is very active there, so they have some problems. And in fact, a new Religious Freedom Restoration Act has also been proposed in Michigan that we're going to have to fight off.
Okay.
I think that.
Well, some more updates on violence against gay people. In Greensboro, North Carolina, Stephen White, 46, we have his picture there. He's the gay veteran who was set on fire by a man he met and beaten by a man he met at a Greensboro, North Carolina bar on November the 9th, has died of his injuries. His assailant was Gary Joseph Upton, 26. Police are not treating it as a hate crime, but as a robbery murder.
He was beaten with a desk phone, a large TV, pieces of furniture, and a deadly weapon. And then I think I said last week that the hotel room was set on fire. He was set on fire. And before he died, he'd had a hand and part of his arm amputated, but he just did not survive. It's a terrible story.
Horrible. And, again, raising awareness of people that you take home and things. You can't always be avoided, but... and they did capture this guy.
An update on a case in Corpus Christi, Texas. In June of 2012, we told you, a lesbian couple was attacked in a local park, one murdered, the other severely wounded. They caught a guy who they are prosecuting for this. So he had a court hearing this week, and 20 supporters of the couple, including the survivor, showed up outside the courthouse to rally in her support and for the prosecution of this guy. The district attorney says there's no evidence of this being a hate crime, but he's also threatening that because these people showed up to rally, they may have to change the venue of the trial because this is prejudicial to the jury to have 20 people show up outside the courtroom.
It's imperative.
Peacefully
It's
asking.
imperative in these cases that people show up and be there for people.
Exactly.
Otherwise, they don't think the community cares.
And then there's Victorville, California, where a gay man was friendly with a straight man, but wasn't out to him until recently. And when he came out to him, his straight friend rounded up a couple of other friends and viciously attacked him.
We have a video report on this, so why don't we watch that?
Okay.
They're looking for a suspect in this brutal attack and robbery that happened last month near the Mall of Victor Valley. Now, the victim in this, who asked us to protect his identity, says that he actually knows some of his attackers from working at the mall and tells me they were friendly until they found out he was gay.
When he found out I was gay, it was not okay.
This 34-year-old man, who we'll call Paul to protect his identity, says he was surprised his new friend, Ethan Walker, got so upset when he found out he was gay.
A couple days later, he called or texted and apologized and said, I'm sorry, it just caught me off guard. It's no big deal.
Paul says he agreed to meet Ethan the next day after he stopped by the mall to get his work schedule for the week, but he never made it there.
He and a few other people met me in the wash, and it was an attack.
He says he was knocked out by a bottle of vodka in this wash next to the mall.
I was stabbed in the leg, struck with 2x4s. My face was shoved into rocks.
Paul says Ethan and several others were yelling gay slurs at him during this vicious attack.
They'll show me, teach me not to be gay. Hope you learn your lesson.
When the men walked away, he was able to run to safety and was rushed to the hospital to be treated for a concussion, among other injuries.
Stab wound in the leg, another 4 stitches there. They had to pull like 70 pieces of glass out of my head before they were able to stitch it up. So, and I had, from where they were hitting me with the 2x4 in the back, several bruises on the back across my ribs.
The attackers broke his glasses, took his cell phone and wallet, including $250 in cash. A 22-year-old and 17-year-old have already been arrested for the attack, but detectives are still looking for this man, 23-year-old Ethan Walker. Paul says he won't let this get the best of him, but he is still struggling to understand this kind of hate.
It's all about love, and who I love is my business, who you love is your business. What does it matter?
Now, anyone with information on Ethan Walker's whereabouts is asked to call the Victorville Sheriff's Station, and you can remain anonymous. Back to you.
I lost a few friends when I came out, but I'm glad they just walked away. Didn't lure me in to get beaten, and now 3 young men are going to be prosecuted for this crime.
Yeah, terrible.
Homophobia.
Also sad, a prominent Florida blogger, gay blogger, Mark Haynes, 54 years old, was killed in an accident. He was taking part in an AIDS ride that was going down through the Florida Keys. They'd finished the first leg, they had a dinner, and then he wanted to go back to his hotel, thought he couldn't get a ride, and was walking down the highway, hit by a pickup truck and several cars. He used to live up here, but moved down there and lived in Fort Lauderdale and did something called Mark's List as a blogger that was a very popular blog. We're sorry to hear of his death. And we also should note the death of Jane Byrne.
Oh, yes.
Former mayor of Chicago. She was a mixed bag, but...
Well, 81 years old. She was the first to show support for the LGBT community. She issued an executive order banning discrimination based on sexual orientation. She supported the gay rights bill there. She was mayor from 1979 to 1983.
Right.
But
she condemned police raids on gay bars. She rode in pride parades after she was defeated for re-election by Harold Washington.
Yeah.
But
she was the first woman mayor, and we still haven't had one in New York.
Yeah. The
first woman mayor in Chicago, of course.
Little controversy in Houston. They
have a lesbian mayor.
Yeah. Nonetheless, the Pride Houston Committee went ahead and scheduled the next year's Pride Parade on the date of what is celebrated by the African American community as Juneteenth, a traditional festival that marks the end of slavery. And at first, when asked to change the date, the Pride Committee said, "Oh, no, we must do it then. We have other reasons." And people said, "Are you out of your mind?" And they finally agreed that this was not a good idea, and they changed it back. Yeah.
Nice to read that the Hobby Lobby decision got trimmed a little bit by a federal appeals court in D.C. Judge Nina Pillard, in the case of Priests for Life versus HHS, said it was not burdensome for that outfit, for an outfit that didn't want to cover birth control, to fill out a form notifying the government that their insurance and their insurance provider, so that the insurer could contract separately for the coverage. Opting out of doing this, she said, is not a substantial burden on religious liberty. So we hope that holds up.
Yeah, we do. Lovely story in Sports Illustrated about a gay man, Max Lennox, a young African-American who was given away by his drug-addicted mother at birth, wound up being raised by a white gay male couple, ended up at West Point, and is now the captain of the basketball team.
A very nice story.
Yep.
Check it out.
And Michael Sam, in other gay sports news.
Ann tells me that he's one of 155 now.
No, one of 97 GQ Men of the Year, but he was picked to be one of 6 alternate covers of the magazine.
Now, you know, Michael Sam is not in the NFL right now. He was not picked up. But, you know, the rap on him was that he was a distraction. You know, it would be a distraction to the team. But the distraction.
No, the rap on him was that he was too small and too slow.
Just come on. He was his record, we talked about this, his record
yes, we have.
as a player.
Evidently, we will continue
was
to.
better. But the real distractions are coming from heterosexual abusers of wives, girlfriends, and children.
Yes.
And the Times did a big story about how this has been covered up and kept in the family for many years.
But someone who did make it into the big leagues was Jason Collins, who
he's gay.
Who's gay and played for the Brooklyn Nets in the NBA, but has just announced his retirement. So we thank you, Jason, for all your good works and wish you the best in your retirement.
And the U.S. State Department had a conference, 3-day conference this week to bolster funding of LGBT advocacy efforts, I guess around the world.
Yeah. The Out Vets group marched in the Boston Veterans Day Parade for the first time.
For the first time?
First time. And in Suffolk County, New York, on Long Island, the legislature, by a vote of 17-0, has okayed moving along a bill to promote the LGBT senior housing plan and a big new community center.
Right.
And the Williams Institute has aggregated studies from 1977 to now, 325 national surveys, and has found, surprise, support for LGBT people up dramatically, but not just among younger people, really in all age groups and all population groups. And that support for non-discrimination laws is up around 75% now around the country. Wouldn't it be nice if that much of the Congress supported them?
Do you think when everybody accepts us that being gay will be less special? Well,
I would say it already is,
what
whatever.
about what we heard this week, at least from sources, that the bad ENDA bill that was passed by the Senate and has been sitting in the Republican House is seen as not really having a chance of getting out or becoming part of the appropriations bill?
I'd be thrilled. I hope that's true. I remain nervous until this lame duck session is actually over and someone steps forward with a new comprehensive bill that will not only include both sexual orientation and gender identity, but will cover not only employment, but public accommodations, housing, government programs, whatever. That is what we're being promised by the big national groups after we at Queer Nation sparked a revolution against the bad ENDA, which was too small and had a big religious exemption.
And was being promoted by Gay Incorporated.
Yes, but they backed off when we tore down the curtain over it, and we await progress. But I get nervous about this, you know, when there is technically a possibility that they could still slip this through, and when some people are saying they're still going headlong in favor of it, I get nervous.
As we have said, and we're not trying to make you nervous, there's still opportunities for the Supreme Court to rule against us on marriage, so it's not over.
None of it is over until it's, as Yogi Berra would say, over.
International news?
Yes.
And it's not over in Botswana. We made some progress this week there. This is in the southern African nation. The court ruled there, the High Court, that the government cannot refuse to register the LGBT group. It's called Lesbians, Gays, and Bisexuals of Botswana, but its acronym is Legabibo, which is kind of fun.
I like that pronunciation. I was going to do it differently, but I think you're right.
All right. It had been denied for 10 years. The country still has an anti-sodomy law, but we had them until 2003, folks, here in the United States in 13 states. So,
well, in Mozambique, the government has for 7 years refused to register the LGBT group there, Lambda Mozambique. and they took out a full-page newspaper ad to protest this refusal to register them. I thought that was pretty bold.
Gutsy.
Yeah.
Gutsy. It's not exactly gutsy for Colin Farrell to speak out on our issues, the actor. We have a picture of him there. But he wrote an open letter to Ireland's Sunday World magazine pleading for marriage equality on behalf of his gay brother, Eamon. He said he knew his brother liked other males from the time that he, Colin, was 12, and he says, "It never seemed unnatural to me." He wrote, "Only love can stamp out the wilting toxicity of the intolerant among us." And he's speaking about the Irish referendum that is going to take place in the spring on same-sex marriage. They have to have a referendum on it there because it's in their family laws in their constitution. It seems like a lot of trouble, but that's what they have to do to have same-sex marriage there. They got to get the people of the country to vote on it.
And they may vote yes, isn't it?
They may.
The polls
I
show
mean,
yes?
Irish referenda, you know, I mean, Irish voted to keep the divorce laws at one time, not so many years ago, but the things are changing over there.
Well,
Yeah, we're favored by like 75% of the people are so sick of the Catholic Church over there because the Catholic Church lied to them, you know, to try to keep them in line all those years, and they were screwing around themselves and
with the
being
kids.
horrible.
Yeah.
And with women, the priests with
Yes,
women, and having
yes.
bishops having children,
Yeah.
and this really just broke the spell.
Well, of course, however, in France, the former president Nicolas Sarkozy is trying to go backwards. They were having a conference to find out who was going to lead the center-right group. And so he got up and promised to support repealing the same-sex marriage legalization.
What he said is what he said before.
Yeah.
He says, "I think that law should be rewritten." So the crowd starts going, "Why are you rewritten? Repeal, repeal, repeal." And he said, "Oh, okay,
Yeah.
repeal."
Yeah.
They got him to say it. He didn't. I guess he didn't want to be on tape saying it. But
Well-
what a pig!
Yeah.
I mean, because how many
Exactly
times has
right.
this guy been married, and to whom?
Yeah, exactly.
My goodness!
All right.
And you know,
well,
he came into office promising civil partnerships.
Yeah, well, that's not marriage.
Well, anyway.
He seems to sway with the wind. Better news from Baja California, Mexico, where several same-sex marriages were performed in several cities. So they have this strange thing in Mexico where state by state, you reach some critical mass of marriages, and then it becomes then it becomes legal for the state. And but it's not quite done in Mexico, but they're making progress inch by inch, as we are in this country.
This is the state of Mexicali, and the governor of the state is okay with same-sex marriage.
And the Mexico City legislature has okayed a bill allowing transgender people to change the gender on their birth certificates without a medical certificate or a court order. They can just say, "This is who I am," and do it.
Just don't try it if you visit Florida.
Yeah.
Anyway, there was a report this week from Eaglehurst, the International Gay and Lesbian Human Rights Commission, that ISIS, they're warning about ISIS. They say they're warning that LGBT Iraqis in ISIS-controlled areas are at imminent risk of death. But things were pretty bad beforehand.
They were bad beforehand, and they're bad for everyone under ISIS. ISIS is killing everybody.
I mean in Iraq.
I understand.
Before
I'm saying,
ISIS got
yes,
involved.
I'm saying they were bad for LGBT people all along, and under ISIS, everybody is in imminent danger of death. But they had some pretty horrible stories of kids being beheaded because they looked gay. And what it really is a plea for more liberal asylum in other countries and a bigger effort to get people out of there and be more open to that.
Please. Speaking of asylum, that Russian same-gender couple that got married because one of them had a male passport, they are seeking asylum in the United States of America.
In New South Wales, Australia, that has become the third state after Queensland and Tasmania to recognize and register the marriages of same-sex couples married elsewhere. Whether they'll get any benefits or just be on a register somewhere, we're not sure. But again, inching forward. In Bangladesh, in Dhaka, Bangladesh, they held their first Pride Parade led by 1,000 hijras, the trans, or officially a third gender in Bangladesh and some other parts of Southeast Asia.
South Asia.
First, thank you, South Asia. First Pride in Bangladesh. They held a big Pride parade in Hong Kong, and a couple of the leaders of the democracy protests showed up and spoke up very forcefully for LGBT rights being part of the program of freedom that they are promoting. And 60,000 people showed up to march for Pride in Santiago, Chile, and demanded family rights there.
Chile, fairly conservative country.
Yeah, I just watched the movie No about the referendum to throw Pinochet out of office after and return to democracy in Chile. It was quite interesting and moving.
We're the ones who installed
Pinochet, yes, thanks to Henry Kissinger.
And killed and helped assassinate Salvatore Allende.
Yeah.
Did I say that right?
Allende.
Allende.
And there was a big Pride Parade in Buenos Aires, Argentina, though the mayor refused to send out any protective forces for the parade.
And I didn't mean that Ann and I killed him. I meant that Henry Kissinger
the United
and the United States did.
Did you ever see the documentary, The Trials of Henry Kissinger?
I think I
Devastating.
did. I think I did years ago. It's a while ago.
Really.
Well, he
was a
can't
while
travel
ago.
to certain countries because he
Yes.
is a war criminal.
He is, and he's under indictment, I think, in those countries. There in San Jose, Costa Rica, there was a protest at a local restaurant after a lesbian couple was ejected from the restaurant for kissing publicly.
It was quite a dust-up.
Yes, there was. And you mentioned the referendum coming up in Ireland. There's also a great local story there where there was a bull, Benji, who was discovered to be gay and wasn't interested in copulating with young female heifers, and so they were going to kill him. So the creator of The Simpsons, Sam Simon, who's an animal rights guy, contributed the money to take Benji and put him out to pasture for the rest of his life and save his life.
You can call him...
Save the gay bull.
You can call him, yes, call him Benji Gable from now on.
The IOC president, Bach, now wants
the International Olympic Committee, for those of you not in the know.
Translator, wants sexual orientation explicitly added to Principle 6, their non-discrimination clause. What they've been saying ever since we got mad at them this year over Sochi and the lack of any non-discrimination protections in Russia, where they had they still have the no gay promotion law. They said, well, you know, when we say no discrimination for anyone, and that covers it, and we say, the hell with you. And so now they're talking about adding sexual orientation specifically. They're having a meeting in Monaco on December 8th, and they'll take that up.
I remember going into seeing a New York City councilman who was resistant on gay rights in the 70s, and he said, we meet with him, and he pulls a paper. He says, I just want you to understand, I looked it up. You're already covered in the Constitution. I said, really? Wow, how did I miss that? I must not be watching Gay USA. I don't think we weren't around in those days.
Yeah. All right.
Anyway.
In Iran, an AIDS official put out a report, 28,000 cases of AIDS that they're acknowledging in Iran. 5,000 have died, 10% of those gay. 50,000 undiagnosed. These may be undercounts, but that's an official report they put out.
In other AIDS news, the big news this week was that the FDA, Federal Drug Administration, policy of banning gay male blood donations, if you've had sex with another man since 1977 only, was challenged by the, quote, U.S. Advisory Committee on Blood and Tissue Safety. They voted 16-2 that it should only be a one-year ban if a man has had sex with a man. But LGBT advocates are saying that's nominally better, but they want sexual orientation out of the policy. It's got to be always based on behavior.
And should look at the behavior of straight people, too.
Exactly.
Unprotected sex, injection drug use, or unclean needles, potentially. And you might try testing people rather than just banning people on their identity.
Right.
Yeah. So it's still obnoxious, and the FDA hasn't even agreed to this. The Red Cross, by the way, has always been a big supporter of dropping the ban, and or certainly in recent years.
And have you have your World AIDS Day plans in New York? We're going to have it on December 1st, always. There's going to be a big morning rally at the Apollo Theater, a kickoff to End AIDS New York 2020 campaign.
Who do they think is going to come to the Apollo Theater at 10 o'clock in the morning?
Believe me, and
Officials of AIDS organizations?
Well, the mayor's supposed to be there.
Okay.
But the Housing Works is very good at getting their clients down there to these things. Up there, down there, depending on where you're coming from.
Okay. Entertainment news. Disney's producing an animated gay film.
Yeah.
Princes.
Yeah.
Yeah. They fall in love. They get married. It's coming out in a year.
Well, it's
Fall 2015 release.
As Disney is run by gay people these days.
That's true.
There were stories about Walt himself, but...
and I have to, I don't know if this is a mea culpa, I wasn't enthusiastic about it to begin with, but I saw an episode of Logo's The Straight Out Report, which I thought was going to be a news program with a straight and gay co-host. Well, it's a review of the week in pop culture, and it may be the worst television program I've ever seen.
Oh my goodness.
You do not have to watch that.
That's saying a lot. Anne has suffered through a lot.
I have.
But I did not suffer through The Imitation Game. This is the new movie about Alan Turing, the World War II codebreaker who was gay. Why don't we show you the trailer first, starring Benedict Cumberbatch, if we have it.
What did you do during the war?
I worked in a radio factory.
What did you really do during the war?
Welcome to Enigma.
I'm designing a machine to break every German message instantly.
It's impossible.
Let me try, and we'll know for sure.
What is it that we're doing?
We're going to break an unbreakable Nazi code and win the war.
Oh.
You do not have to do this alone.
I know a lot of spies, Alan. You've got more secrets than the best of them.
You will never understand the importance of what I'm creating here. Our patience has expired.
Go! Sometimes it is the people no one imagines anything of who do the things that no one can imagine.
Opens November 28th. Benedict Cumberbatch is terrific at this. He really holds nothing back because the character he's playing, the Turing, is not entirely sympathetic. I mean, he's the smartest guy in the room, and he knows it, and so he doesn't get along with other people very well. But it's really kind of, it's a thriller, but they interweave the story of his childhood where he's bullied, and then, of course, it opens up, you know, and they thread it throughout the whole movie. That was Rory Kinnear, the great British actor, playing the cop who arrests him for homosexuality, and that is woven through the whole thing. And it's all about the not acceptance of difference, but how difference influences, you know, our creativity, and that we really are denying the world an awful lot if we suppress creative people and all that kind of stuff. So, and you saw Keira Knightley there playing a sort of a dowdy, nerdy mathematician. It's from a Norwegian director, Morten Tildum. It's great.
Well, a smaller, more independent film opening this weekend in New York on the 21st and in LA on December 18th is The Circle, which is about a group of gay men in Switzerland in the 50s. And it's a mixture of a dramatization of the lives of two in particular, but really the whole group, and interviews with the two men who are still surviving today, you know, quite a bit older, but they are completely charming in their interviews, and the juxtaposition of the sort of dramatization of their lives and the real interviews with them is fascinating. And it's a small film, but a really fascinating film about the interplay of these guys and how hidden they were, and their relationships with their families and with each other, and The Circle. I found it really charming and compelling.
So it is Switzerland's entry into the best foreign language film, but is it a documentary? Is it a fiction film?
Well, it's not fiction.
Could it be in both? You know, some documentaries have reenactments and things like that.
Yeah, well, I think this is just going to it's a small film. It's not a major motion picture release, so I think it's going to, if it gets into the final competition, it's going to be just right there in the foreign language film. But I'd recommend it, The Circle.
Now, a major event on Broadway is the reappearance of Hugh Jackman. Now, if you have tickets to see The River with Hugh Jackman, this is by Jez Butterworth. Stop listening to me. Because now this was a huge hit at the very tiny theater in London, upstairs at the Royal Court. Then it starred Dominic West. And it's in the Circle and the Square, which is about the most intimate Broadway space. We surround the stage and everything like that. But the play is about Jackman's man, there he is, bringing the woman and the other woman to a cabin in the woods, and it has a lot of self-conscious writing that distracts from a semi-mysterious tale of a man, his love of fishing, and his relationship with women. And I don't think it was a good follow-up for Jez Butterworth to Jerusalem, which I liked a lot with Mark Rylance.
Well, also in an intimate theater, the Ansbacher Theater at the Public Theater, I saw last night, this week, Father Comes Home from the Wars, parts 1, 2, and 3. This is going to end up with 9 parts. It's going to be 3 plays, 3 parts each.
Oh, okay.
By, I know, Suzanne Laurie Parks, who won the Pulitzer for Top Dog Underdog, which I loved some years ago. This starts off slower. I really thought I was going to walk out of this, as you know I am wont to do. But they didn't give us an intermission for 1 hour and 45 minutes, and by that time I liked it and stayed for the whole thing.
It's very rare that things get better, isn't it?
It is rare, but this one really did. So if you can stand the first 45 minutes or so, it's about a slave in the South who goes to fight in the Civil War with his master on the side of the Confederacy. But that's really a very small description of what this really is. It's a lot of relationships, a lot of twists and turns, and a hilarious dog in the last act. Okay. So Father Comes Home from the Wars. If you have a little patience, it's well worth seeing.
Well, there's no dog in Allegro. Now, Allegro is the famous Rodgers and Hammerstein flop. They'd done Oklahoma and a couple of other big hit shows, so they wrote an original show. They made this plot up. It's about follows the track of a boy becoming a doctor, and then it's all about you know, do you work with the people with money, or do you work with real people in your small town, and all that kind of stuff. And it started out like Sesame Street, and I was going, oh my God, this is too cutesy, but it got really dark. And I liked it, and there's no shows that I went out humming, and I'm not making a pun, but it's at the Classic Stage Company, and I do recommend it.
The Rodgers and Hammerstein unknown show that I always hum is Pipe Dream, which was based on a Steinbeck
I've never heard of it.
I just bought the CD of the score on Amazon because I have the record that was in my parents' collection all my life.
Happy Thanksgiving if we don't see you, folks.
Oh, we'll see you. We'll be back next week. Thank you very much.